Welcome back to Goodie and JohnnyMo at the movies. We are here at episode 2, and we're going to try and make this video a little bit more concise, a little bit shorter than the last one. I think we got a little carried away. We had a lot to kind of discuss.
A lot of introductions.
Yeah, introductions, interruptions, and then a long-winded review, so to speak, containing everything that we did with the whole MCU and the Avengers. So this time around, we want to try to shorten it up, be a little bit more concise. And this week, we are discussing Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Right. We are going with episode 7.
Yeah, which also means we could fall into the same trap as last time, because now we're dealing with the Star Wars cinematic universe, which is enormous as well. But we will see where it takes us.
I think before we get into our second episode, we wanted to just do a little shot to not only us, but to everybody that has watched and subscribed to our channel so far. So we just want to say cheers and thank you very much.
Salud. The shot of choice today, for those that are wondering, is Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Rye, which is actually very, very tasty.
And very, very smooth.
And we're going to wash it down with this, which we'll let you know what this is in a minute.
Cheers again.
Cheers. This is a special brew of from the Omegang Brewery up in upstate New York by Cooperstown. This is the Three Philosophers, a special one, Belgian style blend. There's a regular Three Philosophers that we've had and we like, and then there's a single barrel.
What is the regular?
What is it called? Barrel aged.
Barrel aged.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a special edition barrel aged Three Philosophers that we came across last year, and just recently came across this Three Philosophers Belgian style blend, which is 9.8% alcohol, which is 0.1% more alcohol than the standard Three Philosophers, and it's got a different type taste to it. So that is our drink of today, and actually being drunken out of a Omegang Three Philosophers glass that was purchased at the Omegang Brewery upstate in Cooperstown.
JohnnyMo likes to have his glasses that kind of match.
Yeah, I like my beverages to match and glasses to match.
So I think with that we're gonna get right into our episode for today. I am a huge Star Wars fan. John is also a big Star Wars fan, I would say. And this is an episode that we really couldn't wait to get to. We were thinking about doing a joint Force Awakens and Last Jedi together, but you know what? There is so much to talk about, and if we really wanted to keep it to
under an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, under an hour and 20 like our previous video, I think it was probably better off that we just stick with one episode this week, and then we'll follow up next week with The Last Jedi.
I would say, Chris, give a little introduction to your history and love of Star Wars. Like, what is your history with Star Wars?
Okay, so
briefly, and I will do the same.
The first thing I ever remember, I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, so we're talking late 80s. I got introduced to, I think the first Star Wars movie I saw might have been Return of the Jedi. And I think ever since then I was hooked, seeing Luke ignite his green lightsaber off of Jabba's sail barge. Seeing a laser sword at that age just sucked me right in. That's still one of my favorite scenes to watch in the Star Wars saga.
So now we are on with...
So now we're here with Disney. Disney comes in, they take over. Cheers. They take over for Lucasfilm. And they make episode 7. We get the news that episode 7's coming out.
Which is actually fantastic, because originally I believe Lucas was not planning on doing episode 7.
I don't think he was going to do it, because every time he does a trilogy, it takes him 10 years, and he knew that. So when he was done with episode 3, there was that question of, was he going to actually do another trilogy? And he said, at the time of whatever his age was when he finished episode 3, he's like, if I start a new trilogy, it's going to take me another 10 years to do it. and he seemed like he had lost it a little bit.
I remember hearing something along the lines of that he was going to focus on other things.
Well, he wanted to focus on television. He actually wanted to do back in the mid 2000s. He had a TV series. I believe he had written, I think, around 100 episodes for this Star Wars TV show that ultimately did not get made. We know that now we have the Disney streaming service that is putting out multiple shows, one of them being The Mandalorian, which I can't wait for that. Jon Favreau's directing and in charge of that. You're having other guest directors like I think Dave Filoni, who did the Clone Wars and the Rebels series, is involved with that. I'm really looking forward to seeing this possibly come out later this year. I believe even, who's it, Cassian? One of the characters from Rogue One is also Caspian. I think his name is.
I don't know.
He's getting a TV show as well, also from the Disney streaming service, and I think they have some other ones. A new season of the Clone Wars is coming out.
Yeah, I mean, and just to go back to something I said earlier that I think might have got cut off is I remember thinking when Lucas was not going to be doing episode 7, 8, and 9, and he was going to be doing other projects, saying to myself, okay, enough of this young Indiana Jones nonsense. You need to do episode 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that there's a third trilogy, and for it to never be on film,
be made, right?
To me, is just absurd because. For someone like me, I mean, maybe there was some literature out there that kind of maybe explained what was maybe going to happen in 7, 8, and 9. But for someone like me, like, if there was no movie, I have no idea.
There's really only...
And that's a void that would be unfilled for most people, which I think was absurd.
There is a theme in, and again, we're going to be talking extensively spoilers here for episode 7. So that movie came out in 2015. So if you have not seen that by now, very sorry.
And if you have not seen any Star Wars movies, I recommend you start watching them, and I would say in order of release.
That will be another episode as well, which order you should watch the Star Wars films, because he and I might be on like-minded terms with that, but I think we could each make some good valid points on different ways to watch the whole entire Star Wars saga. Mm-hmm. But when Disney announced that they were doing episode 7, I was pretty excited because I really wanted to see another Star Wars film. The prequel trilogy was, I think, decent as far as critics go. I don't think they were really critically trashed as far as I remember. Box office wise, I think they did very well.
Sure.
There's just a sour taste in my mouth with the prequel trilogy. I didn't hate them. I liked them. I didn't love them like the original trilogy. It didn't feel like the original trilogy. It felt different. As the movies went forward from 1, 2, and 3, it got more and more heavily relied upon CGI, which for some things were needed, and then like Yoda, for instance, and then other things that I felt were not. Just a lot of backgrounds and starships. They didn't use miniatures anymore. They didn't use real sets and a lot of green screen.
I'll be honest with you. I was actually okay with that. I feel that what Lucas did wrong in the original trilogy was just maybe certain casting choices. I felt that I don't think he should have directed those films himself.
No, I agree.
And I think that's what got him into trouble. I think they were actually very creative and imaginative. They contributed to Star Wars canon. They did not go over any old ground. They didn't, they didn't try and reintroduce, the Star Wars to a new generation. They basically gave a very in-depth 3-movie trilogy of a backstory that was full of completely different type storylines and characters and places. Yeah. And it was very unique. Now, you could argue that it was flawed, but it was very unique and imaginative, and you weren't watching the original trilogy all over again. It was very different. And I think with the advances in CG technology, I think he took advantage of that and used a lot of busy work and stuff going on. But it still, to me, it still had a very Lucas touch to it. I just think that he probably should not have directed it because we know this, but a lot of people don't know that George Lucas only directed Star Wars. He did not direct The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. He was, executive producer and all that, and heavily involved with everything.
The story.
But he gave up the directing reins for the second and third movie, original second and third movie,
which made Empire and Return of the Jedi very good films, and most people will argue that The Empire Strikes Back is the best film of the trilogy.
Exactly.
And
Return of the Jedi, I think people compared, the nonsense of Jar Jar Binks to maybe the nonsense of the Ewoks. But at the end of the day, half of Return of the Jedi is a 4-star movie, and the other half is like a 3-star movie, and it kind of merges together into a really solid 3.5-star movie. But the Return of the Jedi, the story of Luke and Darth Vader and that whole story is
the redemption aspect.
Unbelievable. It's a 4-star film.
The father-son
everything going on in Endor is a little corny.
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back is a perfect film. I think it's one of the best films of all time. It's one of the best films of the 80s. But it doesn't have the stature that Star Wars has, only because Star Wars is the groundbreaking landmark film that made everything else possible.
I think that's a good way to transition to Episode 7.
Yeah. We're here to talk about Episode 7.
We are. A lot of good backstory, a lot of good information. We are getting to Episode 7. So I think Episode 7 comes out, and I was happy to see that we were getting the original cast. In some way, shape, or form, I thought that was going to... I really did. I thought that was going to be a good thing. No Lando in Episode 7. And spoiler, no Lando in Episode 8. Although we are getting him for Episode 9, so I think that is going to be a good thing.
We got a young Lando in Solo.
We got a young Lando in Solo, so they kind of tried to make up for it in that aspect. So Episode 7, I thought it had a great opening. I think you come down onto this planet, and you see Kylo Ren come down in his ship, and he looks very intimidating when he first comes out. Very similar to when we first see Darth Vader come through the Corvette scene in the Tantive 4, when he chokes out, what was that, Captain Antilles, and basically kills him. I really, really enjoyed when Kylo Ren comes in, stops the blaster bolt using the Force, something that we really hadn't seen before, ends up killing off,
Max von Sydow.
Max von Sydow. Who's in the film, I mean, great actor, who's in the film for all of a couple of minutes, has such a small role with Poe, who, again, I like Poe Dameron. I think he was a character that really grew on me from both Episode 7 and Episode 8. But that first opening scene when Kylo comes down, it just seems to be very, very intimidating. And then you start to see how flawed he is throughout the entire film as we go through it further and further.
And you're sure we're filming right now, right?
Oh, yeah, no, we are.
Okay.
Rey gets her introduction, and I loved Rey's intro on Jakku. The only thing I wish we could have seen is some type of, a flashback to the space battle that occurred where all those starships ended up in the sands in this film. Love BB-8. I think he was a great introduction, a great droid that they put in, that J.J. Abrams came up with for this film. Obviously, we have 3PO and R2-D2 through the first 6 films, okay? And they had to do something to create some type of droid that we could fall in love with that was not the original 2, because you cannot replace R2-D2, you cannot replace C-3PO. But I thought the real-world mechanics and how they actually created BB-8, like, that is not a CG character. In most scenes, that is an actual working prop that they made. I thought he was a likable character.
I thought it was just a soccer ball that they rolled across the ground and they imposed the head on it. CG after the fact. No? Okay.
No. Is that a joke, or are you like being serious?
No, it's a joke.
Oh, okay. No, that to me, I really enjoyed him quite a bit. I love the return of the Falcon, calling the Falcon garbage. I mean, How do you not laugh at that? I remember that getting huge laughs in the theater when you saw that. Really liked Finn. I thought he had a really good introduction. Finn is such an interesting character in 7, and they completely dropped the ball with him in 8. And I'm gonna try to really keep this to episode 7 and keep episode 8 till next week. But I may jump back and forth slightly, so apologies if that actually happens. But I really enjoy the new 3 that they kind of introduced between Rey, Poe, and Finn. I think that's a good base of new young characters for this trilogy. What they did bringing back the originals, bringing back Carrie Fisher, bringing back, Harrison Ford obviously takes center stage when he is on screen. I don't think he overshadows the new characters, but I think he does a great job of kind of coming in back as Han Solo. Carrie Fisher doesn't get too large of a role in this. She's...
Yeah.
I would almost say she's underutilized. She's the general, right, of the Resistance, which is funded by the Republic. So the New Republic, it doesn't even, that's the one thing that was frustrating. One of the things that will frustrate me about this film is that there's no discussion about the New Republic and what they're doing to stop the First Order. Okay, so this First Order formed from the Empire, from the ashes of the Empire, which is said in the opening credits.
Well, I have a lot of frustration.
Yes,
but I'll get to it.
There's a few things that we will agree and disagree on in this film, which makes for good conversation. But the fact that we don't get too much of a real backstory here, or even really get to see the New Republic. The only time we see the New Republic is when they die. The Starkiller base shoots on the system that takes out the system that the New Republic is housed in, that's based out of, and almost planets are destroyed. We don't see Jack with the New Republic, and now it's just left with the Resistance, which is another Rebels, basically, another Rebel alliance, so to speak. So I wish we could have gotten more of that, and I want more of Luke. That to me was a little disappointing.
To only be at the end.
JJ does a great job with mystery, and I think that was one of the really good things about this film is it brought back mystery. It brought back this older. The new trilogy has this grittier feel that I thought JJ did a good job of trying to match towards the original trilogy. This is probably one of the biggest points of contention from fans with this film and the new trilogy. Is that it feels too similar or too much of a reboot to the original film. Very similar plot points, having a focus on the hero's journey, this time with Rey instead of Luke, and it's still starting on a desert planet with Jakku instead of Tatooine. Then there's a small band of rebels, but now it's the Resistance instead of the rebels, and then we have a giant planet or system killing Death Planet called Starkiller Base instead of a Death Star. And Han even makes reference to it that it's just a bigger Death Star, and there's always a way to take it down. There's always a way to destroy it. Yes, I think I will come out and discuss the elephant in the room. I think there were a lot of plot points that were very similar to the original trilogy, as he and I have discussed at length, which he feels kind of brings down the film. I can attest to that to a degree, but I think what Disney was going for was they were playing it safe. Mm-hmm. The prequels, the last 3 films in the Star Wars trilogy, episodes 1, 2, and 3, did not leave a great taste in the fans' mouths. So I think Disney was trying to play it safe in bringing back a nostalgic feeling to the original trilogy as close as they could without repeating everything, but had very similar themes throughout this film. I thought it worked. Do I think that it degraded from the film? I don't think it did. Could they have been more creative? I think that's probably the main word, either creative or original. Right?
Yeah.
Those are probably 2 words that come to mind to what they could have done. I mean, even Maz Kanata's scene, okay, when they're on her planet of Takadana, I think, that bar scene. Obviously, that's very similar to the cantina on Tatooine. So all the different aliens. They even had a band playing. It wasn't bits, but it was another band that was playing music. There was a lot of retread in this film.
It's endless
to the original trilogy, to episode 4. Some people keep calling it a soft reboot to it. I simply see it as Disney playing it safe.
Disney, okay. So this is my problem. The movie, in and of itself, is a good movie.
Yes.
It's enjoyable.
Yes.
I would say I have trouble giving it more than 3 stars in terms of overall quality, with lack of comparison to any of the other films. I think if you're just watching that movie and rating it and enjoying it, I would give it a pretty solid 3 stars. And my problem is that I'm not supposed to be watching a 3-star movie that is unoriginal. I'm expecting Episode 7, the 7th movie in the Star Wars trilogy. I'm expecting the original trilogy and Episodes 1, 2, and 3 are two completely different cinematic experiences.
Absolutely.
And I'm expecting to say, wow, when you watch Episodes 1 through 6, you sit there and say, wow, so what happens in the future? What happens in Episode 7, 8, and 9? And, it's going to be something wild. And instead of getting something unique, you wind up getting a reboot. And this is the crux of my problem.
To a degree. The whole thing's not a reboot.
Not the whole thing, but this is my issue. Disney has deep pockets, which is obvious. Because they paid
$4 billion.
$4 billion
For Lucasfilm.
Disney wants to make their money back and then eventually show a profit.
Which they already have.
And they already have, and they will. And in my opinion, Disney did everything based on strategic marketing practices of a product.
We're not counting Solo.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost classic scientific marketing what they did. I mean, they, in my opinion, they created a Star Wars product that was designed to make money. I think they're
which it did.
And they did, and it did, and that's my point.
But they did it at the expense of the fans.
That is their primary goal. They did it at the expense of contributing to the Star Wars canon, in my opinion, which is what one would expect. If you're going to call something Episode 7, this is not, to me, a nostalgic reboot, reworking. You can't just take all these things from the past, kind of mix them up together, and say, okay, we're reintroducing Star Wars to a new generation, and we're going to go over familiar territory that worked before. And to me, that's a cheat. You've cheated the fans out of a unique experience, and you have not contributed to this.
But there are unique new characters. You have
no, I'm not saying.
But that's cheapening. But to me, that's cheapening. But to me, the new characters.
It's over. To me, it's.
I want to take if you're not taking. You have the overall storyline. Okay. Which we all know is Rey's story. Mm-hmm. This trilogy is about Rey.
And there are things I like. I actually like Rey.
But you have Finn, a stormtrooper, since being a child, and he is conflicted when he's on that planet, when he's told to kill those innocent people, doesn't do it, comes out of it and is like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Grabs Poe and says, get me out of here. I need you. And now you have these two guys going off, escaping this new Star Destroyer, and end up getting, shot down, and end up on Jakku, and now all of a sudden you have, of course, Finn and Rey meeting up. There are because of what Disney tried to do, playing it safe.
Right.
I think that hurt the creativity.
Oh, without a doubt.
Of the Star Wars universe, but I do think what J.J. Abrams has started in The Force Awakens, just taking The Force Awakens alone, I want to stay away from the Last Jedi because I'll get in trouble going into that. But what he did in creating these new characters, I thought he did a very good job because it's very hard to follow Han, Luke, Leia, and Chewie.
No, I mean, not for I mean, I know there is some originality in some aspects of the film, but I think that the direction was set by the people with the money, and people had to work
around that.
Work with the best scenario that they had.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that.
Because I think the core problem here is that Disney bought a franchise that was only 2/3 done. You know, they bought Star Wars because, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, they know they're going to make a lot of money. This is a huge thing, but they bought basically a book that was only 2/3 done, and they got no contribution from George Lucas in terms of how the rest of the movie's going to go.
Well, that was also the part on them that they could have brought him in.
They did, and they didn't.
And they did not.
Because ultimately, they want to be the sole. I think they want to be the sole captains of their ship.
George could have been a creative consultant.
And
he did not have to write the films. Obviously, he wasn't going to direct them. But they didn't bring him into consult. And I think that is that is one of my biggest issues with the sequel trilogy, is that you didn't bring in the man that created everything.
Well, I believe there would have been irreconcilable differences in that case, because ultimately what you have is George Lucas on one end, who is interested in Star Wars canon,
who's no longer in control,
and you have Disney on the other end, who really are interested in marketing a product
and making money.
Now, I love Disney. I love Disney films.
So do I.
I love
we're
Disney
both
universe.
We love
I
Disney.
love Disney parks. I love what Walt Disney has done. But keep in mind, Disney today is very different from Disney of the past, and lacking the guidance and creativity of the founder, Walt Disney, it has become a marketing machine product. And Disney is very good at selling their product. But they inherited this story. They bought this story, and there's a blank episode 7, 8, and 9 that they have to fill. And they don't know what happens. And they don't want to know what Lucas thinks is going to happen, because they want to say, okay...
Well, Lucas's vision was different.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm sure they were like, well, whatever he has, he's not involved. We bought it from him. He's gone. And whatever design he had probably did not fall in line with maximum profitability.
Correct.
And Disney basically took in my opinion, they basically said, let's kind of tell a very feel-good general story that pulls these elements from other films that worked and that people like, and if we put it all together with a little bit of new things here and there, we will have a very
They created a starting
good
point.
film that will make money, and it did.
It was a starting point. And this movie made over $2 billion.
And like I said, it's not that I dislike the film. It's just, I think it's a very good film. I think it's a horrible episode 7. That's what I think. Because it's not the 7th movie. It's the first 6 movies, 20, 30 years later, kind of repackages to kind of start it all over again. And if you start talking about the parallels between this movie and the rest, the things that they pulled on, and you can just imagine them sitting in this boardroom going, okay, what are we going to do? We don't know what the hell happens. We're going to say whatever happens, happens. What can we pull from? And what did they do? They pulled a planet just like Tatooine. They kind of pulled a planet very not far off from Endor. And the Death Planet is very cold and icy and is really not that far off from Hoth. You basically have desert, ice, and forest for the most part, which is the first 3 planets in the first trilogy. You have these scenarios where people are walking in the desert. It's kind of like an homage to, and it's a very popular science fiction homage to the original android. In the 1920s film Metropolis, which most people say, "What are you talking about?"
Well, that's where they're based.
Right. I mean, it's very much based on that that android, which is nothing inherently wrong with that.
No, it's an homage to that. It's okay.
Right. But the absurdity of it is that C-3PO, the design of C-3PO, is an homage to that android. And I don't even know if the Disney people realize that Lucas did that already. You know, the design of C-3PO is very much based on the android from Metropolis.
Yeah.
So to have another one in there, I was like, okay, Lucas did that already. You don't need to do it again.
But you realize that they have droids that of all different shapes and sizes
I know.
throughout all the films.
It's very... I just sat there and said, Disney...
It's just another protocol.
I felt like Disney was trying to do something interesting and didn't even realize that Lucas did that with C-3PO. So to me, it was a little pet peeve. Now, I mean, I'm not going to criticize the film unbelievably,
based on that, right.
but like as a movie cinemaphile that knows, you know, where, you know, when people start to make references, homages, I know I can catch those. I was like, okay, that's silly because I don't even think they realized Lucas did that. But other things that they did that really pulled from the other films. When they're trying to blow up the Death Planet, which again is literally just
it's one giant.
It's just a larger Death Star. It's a larger Death Star.
It's a planet-sized Death Star.
You know, there's a part where, you know, where, you know, the ships are flying in a trench.
Almost a trench into the planet. Well, there's a trench around the entire equator of the planet. When you look at it from space, the equator is a trench.
Right, but
the whole equator.
I mean, but they're sitting there going, let's recreate that feel of the original Star Wars going through the trench. And that's what so much of this was. It was so much of a pulling of these feelings from other movies and, you know, putting it all together. And, you know, some people sit there and enjoy it, and then you got people like me and sit there and say, okay,
well,
I've seen this. I've seen all of this somewhere before. When are you going to give me something new?
Well, I think your biggest... I think... I understand what your biggest argument is that the fact that it's a good film, but it's not original.
Right.
Like you're taking from the original trilogy.
You're pulling the bits and pieces and making an amalgamation, and your purpose is, their sole purpose is to make a movie that's going to make a lot of money and will be enjoyed. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying the movie, but again, you know, you have taken on the ownership and the helm of promoting Star Wars canon. And if you're going to label something Episode 7, you should be doing something more creative, I think. One of my favorite lines that annoys me from the film is, what's the girl who owns the bar, her character name?
Maz Kanata?
Yeah, Maz Kanata. Maz Kanata sits there and says, I've been around for 1,000 years and I've seen the dark side. She goes, I've seen it with the Sith, I've seen it with the Empire, and I've seen it with the First Order. And I'm like, okay, you've literally named the only 3 things that everybody already knows about. She's been around for 1,000 years. Had George Lucas been scripting this, there would have been at least 1 or 2 other names in there from another chapter in the past
eras.
that has, and they're like, they don't know. They don't know. They're just going with what they have. They're not even willing to hint at hidden stories.
No, but that's also right, because you have to remember one thing. When the original trilogy came about, that Republic was around for 1,000 years. The Jedi were around for 1,000 years of peace. Mm-hmm. The Sith was, supposedly destroyed, or, as we had learned, went underground. So for 1,000 years, Maz's entire timeline, there was nothing. It was the Sith, and then there was nothing until Palpatine took over and became the Empire. Other than that, it was just the Republic.
Really? I mean,
the Republic didn't even have an army. You have to remember that. The Republic created the clone army at the end of the prequel trilogy. Other than that, they didn't have an army. Okay. The Jedi were the protectors and the guardians.
Okay, I got you though. You know that. Disney didn't know that.
But that's not even in books, though.
Disney, but Disney doesn't know that.
If anybody who's seen the original trilogy, and even the prequel trilogy, that's all they have.
No, I know, that's all they have. But Disney doesn't know that that's all there could be.
See, well, that's where I think you shortchange. I think you shortchange them a little bit. But you shortchange. But you have to remember too. But you have to remember, J.J. Abrams was a part of this story. This guy's not some quack off the street that Disney hired. This guy knows Star Wars to a degree, and I believe when he was choosing, the way he was directing some of this stuff, he did some of these things intentionally.
Okay.
So Maz's line reads true.
I just find it hard to believe that if Lucas was scripting it, there would have been a fourth term in there. It would have been something. There would have been something else.
But even if
there would have been something else.
But even if it was, that would have been a reference to, again, something else that nobody knows anything about.
Right.
You could have said the Bando Gora.
But I think Lucas would have
could have said the
all of
Red
a sudden at some point expanded upon that reference.
You could have talked about
done something in a backstory.
You could have talked about anything you wanted. No one else would have known that either.
That's
so
okay.
So you're still in the same boat.
But Lucas would have been in charge and said, "I'm going to throw another name in there, and I'm going to tell people what that means later." And this is one of the things that I think you went into the movie with like the best intentions, and I know that you watched the movie and there were things that happened, and you were like, "Oh, they didn't really explain that. I'm waiting for them to come up with explanation."
Yes.
And my theory in that is that they're not going to explain that because they don't even know what if they throw these Easter eggs out, they're not even filling them.
One of the biggest problems with the sequel trilogy, and I think this is well known for people that are watching this and maybe don't know about this, when they were doing the sequel trilogy, they basically gave the creative rights to the directors. So they said, JJ, take care of episode 7 for us. Rian Johnson, take care of episode 8. And originally they had Colin Trevorrow take care of episode 9. Colin Trevorrow was not really pretty much in sync with what Disney wanted for the last film. So, creative differences, c'est la vie. We have J.J. Abrams stepping back in, okay? We're going to see what that film turns out to be. Mm-hmm. Episode 8, Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson turns in the final script to The Last Jedi before The Force Awakens even comes out. That, to me, is a problem. Because John makes a good point. What is the roadmap? What are the sequence of events? How do we get from A to B to C in these 3 films? If you don't have that lined up, that's a problem. I thought JJ basically put up a great softball for Rian Johnson. And this is a conversation I really want to save till next week, mm-hmm. but I'll hint at this. Is that Rian Johnson takes that softball and he turns it into something else because it's not in line with what he had envisioned for his Star Wars film. So there are a lot of issues when it comes between 7 and 8.
It's not a trilogy in sync with itself.
It's not. Like you almost have two different films going on, but because they're labeled 7 and 8, we have to follow them in sequence mm-hmm. between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi.
Right.
It's almost like the director was forced to follow the other director's footsteps, but he didn't want to do it. And you could clearly see it in the work. And we'll go on forever if we keep talking about that.
Yeah.
So we are going to save that for next week.
Just to bring up another couple things that threw me a little bit. I felt that in all of the 6 original films, all the different creatures and droids that were introduced or shown, even in whether they had large roles or small roles, I felt that they were always eye-catching. They were always were interesting. They were funny or different and very imaginative. And I felt that without Lucas's handiwork in that, I feel that aside from BB-8, who I really like BB-8, I feel that most of the on-screen droids or animals in Episode 7 and 8 are very boring and lacking in imagination. They're just there and they're bland. And the type of interesting life and diverse life that you used to see in any of the 6 films, you don't get that. And I think it's because they don't have that creative vision at the helm going, let's do something wild. I think you just have a bunch of people going, we need to create some animals and droids, and they just kind of throw it out there.
I thought on Jakku,
and I think most of it fails. I mean, you look at these scenes. There's one scene where, either these droids are walking by and they're boring, and these animals pick their heads up out of the sand and look around, and it's like, that's been done already, and it worked, and this didn't work. I'm like, I just find the lack of the creative touch in all the little places of the film.
I think that's where it's missing George.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things that drives me insane, not that it drives me insane, but it's...
We're going to get to a part where you actually like something.
We might. We might. No, we do. Like I said, I said it's an enjoyable film, but it's all these decisions that Disney's making that drives me insane. Because I think they introduce I think so much of it's a marketing, it's a strategic, like I said before, a strategic marketing decision of product, and they bring in this diversity of characters and very PC-ness of characters, just so they can check off the demographics.
Check off boxes.
You know, so my thing with all the diversity is that it's not a matter of whether there should be this or should be that, or this is bad or this is good. It doesn't matter what the final product is. The point is that their decisions are entirely driven by marketing and trying to appeal to the broadest base. And they're obviously going out of their way because you're seeing all these levels of diversity that you may not have seen in previous films, not because people were trying to exclude anybody, but it's like, this is what Disney does. Disney is trying to make the most valuable product they can. And how do you do that? You appeal to everybody. And they're going to sit there and say, how can we bring these, because they already know they're going to get all the Star Wars fanatics. They already know that.
Of
and
course.
now another, if all you got was the Star Wars fanatics, you're still making money. But they want to make more money. They want to be more appealing. And how do you do it? You say, you bring in female characters. You bring in various other non-white characters. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. We've had Lando Calrissian. We've had all that. But they're sitting there going, okay, let's get them all in. Let's get them all in.
I think you're shortchanging that a little bit.
Which is not wrong in and of itself, but like I said, it's intent.
I understand
Their intent
what you mean.
Populating the universe is to make sure that these seats in the theater are populated with all the different people.
But it should be.
It will be.
Like everybody
if you're making a good movie.
When you're talking about,
because the original Star Wars brought everybody.
When you're talking about multiple planets of people, you're going to have all of those diverse cultures and people coming in. So to me, that rings true, regardless if Disney checks off their box or not. That to me doesn't even matter.
See, to me that's the crux.
Behind the scenes, when you're talking about the higher up people, do they want stuff like that included? I'm sure that they do. But when it comes from the story making aspect and what they're looking to put in there, I think that to me rings true to them as far as including all of those different.
Let me twist this a different way. It's not that that bothers me in and of itself.
I know it doesn't bother you.
It bothers me that
they're being told to put.
You have this immense lack of creativity. You're making all these great marketing choices. From a marketing perspective, they're going to say, this is going to make us money. This is going to make us money. They're so focused on that, hitting all the demographics, and they have absolutely no interest in the creative side and contributing to the Star Wars canon, and maybe even taking a chance by doing something a little bit, different. It's like they're playing it safe down the line and doing everything they can to make sure that they have appealed to every single possible group. And it's like, you know what? Make a great movie, period. Do something exciting. You have the money to do so. Disney has the money to do whatever they want and do so, and that would have brought everybody in. Because again, the original Star Wars is one of the most popular movies ever made, and it was like people from 5 to 95 of all cultures, and everybody loved that film.
But I think a lot of people have really enjoyed this film, and I think the fact that it made over $2 billion goes to show it was enjoyed by most people.
Well, okay,
for some of the things that they put.
Don't talk
in
about
that
money.
film.
Don't talk about money, because keep in mind, adjusted for inflation.
Even adjusted for inflation, this film made over $2 billion.
Well, yeah, because Disney knows how to market. That's what
I know, but
Disney is successful at this.
But people in all shapes and sizes came to watch this film, probably because it had all those things that you were checking off.
Yes,
So like even regardless of the fact that
Disney was successful in making money, and that was their point. To me, that's the issue. That was their sole point.
I understand their sole point
at the expense of creativity and the ingenuity or uniqueness of a new trilogy. To me, that's all they're interested in. So, like I said, it's a 3-star movie, maybe even 3.5. Extremely enjoyable, but very unimaginative, unoriginal, and very checking off the boxes for marketing PC. They're just following the numbers. They're following the money.
But I think that's also,
and that is the definition of product.
But I think that's
versus
also
art.
But I also think that's difference of 2015 versus 1977.
Oh, that's a whole different ballpark.
I think, but you have to agree that there are major differences over almost 30 years between those two.
Oh, sure.
Actually, more than 30 years.
Okay, so oddly enough, Star Wars is one of the reasons why the culture is, the movie making culture is what it is today.
Absolutely.
And that's another discussion.
That's another discussion.
Because believe it or not, from all of this, I am still a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of the Star Wars franchise. So I just take it a little personally when I feel like it's not being done the appropriate justice. Because I think we can honestly say that if Lucas made episodes 7, 8, and 9, it would have been a completely different movie.
It could have been completely different, but we don't know if it would have been
style-wise and story-wise. It would have been something completely different.
It could have been, but we're not talking about. But we're talking in which way, shape, or form. Lucas, I love Lucas, and he's a great storyteller. He's not a great director.
No, he's not. And plus, keep in mind, life goes on. People get older. Lucas. What Lucas could do in the 70s and 80s and 90s.
But also too, look
is
how much,
not what he could do.
Look how much his vision changed over the years, even with the original trilogy. The fact of him going back and him retouching up on the special edition and including some scenes that really people took offense to. Case in point,
Han Solo. Just talking a little bit more about the whole marketing thing. I just want to. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there sitting there going, "What are you talking about?" George Lucas was interested in making more money than anybody else in the Star Wars franchise than anybody else.
Figures.
Okay, but there is a difference. Okay, so George Lucas made a boatload of money on the merchandising, but everything that he expanded upon
merchandising.
His first priority was the creation of Star Wars canon.
No, he's all about storytelling.
Well, the storytelling is, to me, the same as Star Wars canon.
Yeah, okay.
His main purpose was to create the story, create and add to the Star Wars canon, and then from there, get into all the merchandising, whether it be toys or action figures or coloring books or whatever. To me, it was it was more of a natural progression. I mean, granted, he probably exploited it more than anybody else in the history,
and
especially at that time,
in
the 70s. I mean, nobody made money like he did on movie merchandising. It was astronomical. It was a game changer. But that was not the primary motive. His primary motive was making the movies and making and telling these stories. And I feel that the difference between what Lucas did and Disney is Disney has a significantly much less interest in the canon. I think they could care less about that. They're more interested in making money, and their merchandising, to me, is some of their things have just been really ludicrous. It's just all over the place. And I think Lucas would have been happy to do episodes 7, 8, and 9, whereas Disney is like, we can't stop there.
No,
and I'm okay with the
but they had the
Star Wars stories.
But for every year, they basically had a plan of, okay, it's every other year you're going to have a saga story and then a Star Wars story.
And I'm okay with a Star Wars story.
A saga story, a Star Wars story. And they did that for the last few years. You had
and they're going to do that
theme
parks and all that stuff.
Rogue One, you had episode 8, and then you had Han Solo. Just unfortunately, I think they put Han Solo out way too early. You put Han Solo out in May, where The Last Jedi just was released in December. Why not release it in December? You release Rogue One in December, you should have had Han Solo out in December. You should have put Solo out then too.
Yeah.
I think it would have made more money. I don't think Solo's that bad of a film.
No, and this is a very important distinction.
It didn't make money. It made the least amount of money out of those Star Wars
which
films.
is a shame.
Which is a shame. I think that, you want to talk about marketing, that was poor marketing and poor placement. That was poor product placement. Putting it in May, right after Avengers Infinity War, and amongst a few other films that were heavy hitters in summer blockbusters.
I don't think they consider the Star Wars stories to be their cash cows. I consider them.
But Rogue One made so much money.
But I think they consider them like bonus projects.
Right, but Rogue One made a ton of cash.
And I'll be honest with you. Okay, so I actually really enjoyed Rogue One immensely. I think it's the best movie.
I think Rogue One is the best movie that Disney has made. And Disney Star Wars films, that to me is the best.
And I enjoyed Solo as well. And the reason why they're actually able to do those movies is because the premise of the film already exists. You know, with Episode 7, 8, and 9, it is a blank slate. With the Rogue One and even Han Solo, it's a Solo film, there is a premise. They're filling in blanks. They already know what the story should be. The story of Rogue One is to be, you know, how they got the plans to the Death Star. The story of Han Solo is his origin and how he met Chewie. Yeah. You know, they actually have a very generic story outline that they fill in the blanks. The problem with Episode 7, 8, and 9 is there is no story outline. They're filling in everything, and now they're playing. They're playing it safe. But in the other scenarios, it's like, okay, if this is what we're going to do, they do it, and they can fill it in because the seed of the story is based in Lucas's story. Right. It's in the canon he has already set. So I honestly think it's easier for them to do the Star Wars, the in-between Star Wars stories, because they already kind of know what they need to do.
Well, they know where it's been and they know where it's going.
Right, exactly. And once they have that general outline, they can fill in the blanks. But when they have a blank slate, they're going to go with the safe route, the safe story, the story already told. You know, and we'll see what they've done differently in episode.
I mean, the biggest when you and I talk, especially after 7, but a little bit after they did episode 8, is my biggest thing was, let's see how let's see what the next movie brings. Let's see what the end of the trilogy is going to be.
Right.
Because if you were to judge Star Wars Episode 4 on its own, before you got to see the rest of the trilogy, mm-hmm. there's a different weight to it because of how big the other 2 films become in the overall meaning of the trilogy.
Sure.
In the story itself that it tells. Mm-hmm. Talking about Episode 7 and Episode 8 independently is one thing, but I want to see the entire story wrapped up in Episode 9.
Right.
That's why
I don't think you're going to have that overall superstructure that is just so gratifying.
I mean, we're hoping that JJ can wrap everything up in 9 with a nice little bow and answer all the questions that we're hoping get answered. It may or may not happen. We honestly don't know. Yeah. We don't.
I mean, in sense of scope, I just feel that it's so limited. And not to go over previous ground, but like 2 other things that I felt in Episode 7 that were just, complete. We've seen this already. To me, Kylo Ren is really just a lesser version of Darth Vader. I mean,
But that's the point of him.
But instead of creating a brand new villain like Darth Maul was a nemesis, and Count Dooku was a nemesis, and they were completely separate, independent characters, very original. And now you have Kylo Ren, who really is just a watered down and somewhat, in my opinion, annoying and immature version of Darth Vader in look and style and everything. And it's
that's done. But don't you think that's done on purpose? Because his whole
done on purpose.
His whole point is that he's trying to live up to his grandfather, and yet he struggles knowing that he won't be. Even Rey tells him when Kylo Ren's trying to mind read Rey, she reads him right back and says, "You fear that you're never going to be as strong as Darth Vader." That's his fear, and he's living that out.
I agree, but I feel that's a convenient storyline that they put in place because they will do nothing but introduce a character in the vein of Darth Vader. So if you're going to do that, then that's how you do it.
But if you're going to do it with anyone, it's his grandson.
But the point is, you don't have to do that, and they chose to, and it was, to me, it was just like the same idea, just retreaded a little differently for today's generation.
I mean, it's good that you brought that up. I like I said, the introduction of Kylo Ren in episode 7, I think is a strong introduction. Mm-hmm. And then, as the movie goes on, you see these little temper tantrums that he has.
And you, of course, naturally, they choose to recreate a whole showdown on a
platform
over a chasm, which is right out of Empire Strikes Back.
If we've learned anything in Star Wars, nothing good ever happens on a catwalk without any type of rails in Star Wars. I
think the problem is that there are so many examples of this retreading and that's the problem. It's so obvious. Like, they didn't even try to hide it. It was just an endless series of, yep, saw that in this movie, yep, saw that in this movie, saw that. With a little bit of interesting original scenarios thrown in between.
But it still made an entertaining story.
Right, but for a new generation that maybe is not as beholden to, I think, the originals. And I think most older true lovers of Star Wars will look at that and say, are you kidding me? I've seen that already. Yeah. But then there's a whole new generation, because population-wise, all the people that, lived and loved the original trilogy, that was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot of those people are older. A lot of those people are dead. There's a lot more. The movie going fan base.
Different age gaps that you were trying to attract.
You're marketing towards 15 to 23-year-olds, and most of those people were not even born when the original trilogy came out. So they're playing to their fan base. It's all marketing strategy.
I think there was something that Disney had with that, because they succeeded in a way.
Well, they made money
because
that's their job. That's their purpose.
I think ultimately they tried to create a film that brought the older generation who loved the original trilogy together, as well as bringing this newer generation that may have or may not have seen Star Wars, and it's basically almost starting with Episode 7. And they try to make the film possible that is going to kind of please the best of both worlds. They're not going to please everybody, and I think they knew that.
Well,
they were going for the overall picture.
I think they pleased 2 out of 3, because the newer generation is going to love it. The people that enjoy that nostalgic walk down memory road are going to sit there and say, "Oh yeah, I like this." But then me personally, and I think there's a lot of people in that third group that wanted to see a new trilogy, Episode 7, 8, 9, that was original and blown away and unique.
And I get that.
An amazing, blown away cinematic movie experience. Maybe not a 4-star movie, maybe not the best thing you've ever seen, but something different, something surprising, something like, wow, this is a book I've never read before.
But the prequel trilogy itself, those were not 4-star films. We can agree on that.
No, but they were, right? They were different and unique.
They were unique and original. It had different plot points. You had a very large political theme in those films.
And an entirely different landscape. I mean, you're talking about the visuals of Coruscant, and the underwater kingdom of Naboo, and even the above ground of the
city itself.
The city
of Coruscant.
Where Queen Amidala. They were original, and they contributed original storyline and chapters to the Star Wars canon, and I don't feel like I got enough of that in Episode 7 or 8. And and what is Disney going to do? They're not stopping in Episode 9, because
they have spin-offs in the way.
They're going to do more trilogies just because
after 9 is done. We don't. We're assuming at some point we may get more saga films as far as episodes go.
But I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to do a 10. I thought that was the plan, to do a 10, 11, 12, and possibly even a 13, 14, 15.
I don't think we're going to know that until after this trilogy ends. Mm-hmm. I think Disney right now they want to wrap up 9, and then they want to focus on the creators from the Game of Thrones, the Benioff and Weiss, those guys, they've got their own trilogy set up. Rian Johnson has a trilogy that he's supposed to be doing. After the controversy with 8, I still don't know if that's going to get off the ground or not. I mean, the Benioff and Weiss thing is supposedly like that's ready to go. Like the script is written, and I think they are looking to push that forward. I'm hoping we get more information about that this year. Hoping at Star Wars Celebration, which takes place in I think like April or May of this year, that we can actually get actual data on that and find out, okay, what period is this taking? Listen, you think of Benioff and Weiss, you think of these guys from Game of Thrones. What are you thinking? You're thinking the Old Republic. You're thinking that time period of 1,000 years before, if not more, when there were a ton of Sith around and Jedi, and we're going to get something like that just because of what they've done with Game of Thrones, and it calls back to that era, to that time. I mean, that's a huge tangent, and I understand that, and that's a great conversation in and of itself. And I don't want to take anything away from that, because we can have a whole episode just on the possibilities of what they could be doing with their trilogy. I think we can say that until they actually start to tell us what they plan on doing.
Yeah, I'm just afraid that over the course of time, the story and the artistry over the course of, because I can tell Disney and Star Wars are going to be married together for decades, and over the course of time, it'll just be a dilution of originality. And where people 20 years from now, I'm still going to be here 20 years from now, but I'm going to sit back and say, Jesus, it's where are we now compared to where were we? And it was so much better 40, 50 years ago.
I hope that's not the case. I really do.
I hope not too.
I hope they put the right people in place. People like Dave Filoni.
Allow for creativity and bold choices.
Now, Dave Filoni is someone who has been the shepherd for the Clone Wars, for the Rebels series. He's going to be, like I said, he's going to be a director for at least one episode, if not more, of The Mandalorian. This is a guy who worked with George and was almost his right-hand man during those animated series days since they started doing the Clone Wars. This is a guy who could spearhead and basically be the Kevin Feige of the Star Wars universe and roadmap everything and say, hey, listen, we know the time frames of everything. This is something that we could do, and we're gonna map this out so that it's done properly.
Yeah,
and get that creativity.
Put
back.
A proper investment in the roadmap.
I think there was something to be said of that, and I think when we talk more a little bit about Episode 8, we'll get to really discuss the disconnect between Episode 7 and Episode 8, because I think that is a big conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just important to note that there is a distinction between the Star Wars saga pre and post Disney ownership.
Yeah, but that's the controversy. This is the that is the controversy right now in the Star Wars fandom, and the divisiveness that has occurred since The Last Jedi, and some people will even argue since The Force Awakens has come out, and that's all related since Disney has taken over in their films. I think it's really just come to a head since The Last Jedi, and you've seen, half the fans that have loved that film, half the fans that hate that film, and a lot of the blame they want to throw back to either Rian Johnson or to Disney, and whoever you want to end up blaming for that, for the people that dislike the direction that they feel Star Wars is going in. You're not going to please everybody.
No, you're not. But they don't care as long as they make money.
They've made their money.
No, they have. Well, did they make back their investment?
They've made more than that.
Really?
The
$4 billion?
Force Awakens made over $2 billion.
Worldwide, okay.
Worldwide. Last Jedi made close to $2 billion. I don't think it made 2, but it made close to it. Rogue One, I think, made over $1 billion.
And I'll be honest with you, if that is the case, every single person at Disney will say we're out of our freaking minds, because they'll say we made our money back, we were right. And the point is at the end of, okay, this is going to be one of my final notes. When you look at the history books and everything, you could go back to any year in movie history, and nobody really remembers or cares what movie made the most money in 1967 or 1978 or 1942 or 2001. That's just a figure in a book somewhere. Those are not the things that people talk about every day. What people talk about are what were the best pictures from that year? What were the interesting pictures from that year? What were the pictures you remember from that year?
I think it's generational, though.
I don't know that any generation really carries those statistics with them on a day-to-day basis.
If you look at different chats and conversations that go on nowadays,
I know a lot about film, and I mean, I know what the box office champs were adjusted for inflation, but in terms of talking about film, when you critique film and whether it's past or present, it's such a small element of, well, how much money did it make against budget? Nobody cares about.
If you're talking about the film itself, if you're talking about the film itself,
the studios care about that.
Yes,
the studios care about that. The studios care about the money.
But some fans,
the rest of the fans,
but there are fans that use that as a crutch because if they, how do you deem a film successful? How do you deem that a film is successful? Mm-hmm. A lot of people will point towards box office. Did it surpass the numbers that it needed to hit in order to make future films?
It was, was it profitable?
And I think that can be a huge factor. I don't believe that's the only factor, nor do I believe it's the main factor.
Yeah.
But it is a factor when talking about how successful a film is.
Sure.
I don't think that's... Listen, we could talk about Transformers, the fourth film in the franchise, ended up making over $1 billion worldwide.
And it was horrible.
That is not a good film.
No.
However, it still made over $1 billion. Now, I'm not saying that film is Star Wars The Force Awakens. Again, I think we both agree that Star Wars Force Awakens is a good film. Mm-hmm. It could have been more creative. We could have hopefully seen a little more originality.
That's always what I've always said. To me, it could have been a better Episode 7 as opposed to
a Star Wars story.
Yes. Yeah. Like I say, when you talk about budgets and money, your favorite films are what they are, and it doesn't. And like I said, at the end of the day, the only people counting the money is the studio, unless it's just a random fact to know about.
Well, this is a troll. If it's an internet troll, they're gonna hound you on the box office sometimes.
Okay, I'm gonna show my age and say I have no idea what it is.
And that's fine.
But yeah.
But I mean, overall, I enjoy the Force. I'll say this: I walked out of the Force Awakens with a smile on my face, happy to see some of my original characters again. Seeing Luke at the very end of the Force Awakens in his Jedi robes, getting handed his lightsaber, I wanted to see where that went. I was excited to see where what was going to happen over the next 2 years, and the speculation that ensued from that. What were we going to see in Episode 8? The story of Episode 8 is a little different for me, and I think we'll get into that more next week. Mm-hmm. But overall, I was very happy when I left Force Awakens. I had my issues with it. I agree with John. I think there could have been a lot more originality to it and some creativity. I do think we got some really good original characters, some new original characters to follow. I was happy that they tried to sew in as much of the original cast as they could to try to tie in that old trilogy to what they were trying to do now. I appreciated that in what ways that JJ did bring those in. And I'm looking forward to 9. I can't wait to really see the first trailer, and hopefully it's going to put the ship where it needs to go. I think we need to hopefully right the ship, and I think JJ can be one of the guys to really help do that.
We, as we say we will always do, we did a very recent viewing of Episode 7. It was the first time I had seen it, not in the theater. I hadn't watched it at home at all. So I had seen it a couple times in the theater. Finally saw it again a day or two ago for the first time in probably...
Since you saw it in the theaters?
Which was 2 years ago?
2015.
Right, so 3 years ago.
Almost
3 or 4
4
years
yeah.
ago.
Well, three and change.
And overall, I mean, like I said, I enjoyed the movie. There were many aspects of it I enjoyed. There were many characters I enjoyed. But then, again, there were certain aspects of it I just didn't enjoy, even on a surface level, just from a movie standpoint. But, it was just the knowing how that movie came about and the creative or in my opinion, non-creative decisions that were made in order to make that movie, which I think plagued me and lessened the experience for me, just because of like again, you're not making a self-inclusive movie. On that note, I think we may be done with our analysis of Episode 7 and its place in the entire Star Wars cinematic universe.
I think it's a better judgment than a review, because obviously we dove a lot into the Star Wars universe and kind of leading into The Force Awakens a little bit.
And not for nothing, I think that's where the juicy parts are. I think that's where the...
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, granted, and this I think is always going to happen. Like when we talk about a film...
It's going to do deeper than just a scene-by-scene analysis.
Absolutely. Especially when we're talking about something as large of a franchise as Star Wars and the history that carries. JohnnyMo and I were talking about some of the things that we want to discuss in future episodes and just some of these other films. We're in the future, we're going to be talking about the new Halloween film. We want to talk about the movie A Quiet Place. Amongst other films that we've seen over the last couple of years.
Some of our, we'll talk about, maybe some of our favorite films, or even, go back to some older classics. And, like I said, our goal is to...
Have a conversation.
And have many, and keep going. This is Episode 2.
Right.
I think we're easily going to get into double digits, and...
Hopefully,
contrary to what some people in our family might think, we will at some point we will be in triple-digit episodes.
That's where we want to get to.
And
we want to keep doing this every week.
Someone said, "How are you going to do that?" I said, 20 episodes a year. Minimum.
I think
5 years from now, we're at 100.
I think if we try,
it's basic math.
I mean, I think our goal really could be to do one a week.
I mean, you could do one a week, but there'll be some off weeks and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, you easily could do 30 a year, and that's a little over 3 years. That's 100 episodes.
And we will get better at making things concise and short into the point.
I mean, this is our second episode, so I mean, again, this is our first episode with Star Wars, so there was a lot to talk about. If we were going to talk about another Marvel movie at some point or another Star Wars movie at some point, it's not going to be as long because we've said a lot of the stuff that we've already said. And trust me, we could do this forever because at the end of the day, the cinema is enormous. It spans back decades and genres and countries, and there's always film to talk about, and there's always great film to talk about. And me and Chris are both extremely versed in film.
Just very passionate about it.
There's so... I mean, we can talk about anything. I mean, I could... We'll never going to
run out of something to discuss.
Film is a big enough category and passion that we will never run out of material to talk about, and I don't think we'll ever get tired of it. And that's what I think I look forward to.
But I think it's fun to have healthy conversations.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, we're not always going to see eye to eye on a particular film. We might both enjoy a film immensely. We both might dislike something, or we might be on opposite ends of a film. But at the end of the day, we could have nice conversations about what we both enjoyed and what we both disliked about a film, and still walk away feeling like we accomplished something. And that's what we hope to do here.
Yeah, and we hope that our insights and our passion and our discussion will enlighten you to either think about things differently, or learn something about these films that you never really thought about before.
And share with us your thoughts too as well about the film. we want to converse with you guys. We want to hear from you as well.
And increase your scope of what it means to go see a film. Going to a film should not just be should not just be mindless entertainment.
It's an event.
It should be thought-provoking and thoughtful and engaging and mental and interactive. With other people, go to the movies with people and talk about it with them.
Absolutely.
And put things in a historical perspective, because film has been around for well over 100 years, and there is a history to film, and there's a history to genres. There is a history to science fiction and horror and drama, and things constantly relate back to or speak back to or pay homage to. Or something maybe the next evolution in the science fiction genre or the fantasy genre or whatever. It is a huge dialogue. It's a huge discussion point. There's cinema is a very well respected and endearing topic with a long history that many different people can bring upon their perspective and what the movie has seen, because nobody has seen every movie ever made.
No.
So there's always something to talk about. So I definitely look forward to all of our conversations. And again, they won't always be about superheroes and Star Wars and the typical franchises. We definitely will talk about those because those are great.
But we honestly started with these.
There's more. There's always more.
And we started with these honestly because we knew that these would be popular topics. Mm-hmm. We wanted to start off with something that was popular because we want everyone to start to know us a little bit, so that when we do start talking about some of these films or other movies or
different types of films, you'll stick with us and say, hey, what do they have to say about that?
Exactly. Like you'll hopefully want to see our insight or our thoughts on that, and then hopefully we can have a nice conversation together. Because that's honestly all we want. Our thoughts and our opinions are ours. We're not always going to see eye to eye and stuff, but it's all about the conversation. Yeah. And it's about how you have that conversation.
And I hope it's fun. I hope it's as fun for the viewer as it is for us.
Absolutely.
I absolutely enjoy this. And again, completely unscripted, off the cuff. We just go in. Yep. We go in, and wherever we go, that's where we wind up.
That's it. So I think with that, we
wind up at the bottom of our glass.
Guys, thank you very much. We will see you guys next week at the movies, where episode 3 is going to talk about The Last Jedi. All right?
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Have a great night.